A young model brutally shot and killed while waiting for an Uber to her daughter's birthday party. Now, her massive social media presence and the adult content she created are coming into question. Could she have had a stalker, or was this just a random attack? The killer or killers are still on the loose, so what are investigators doing to track them down? We'll hear from retired Commander Will Svilar for his take on this case. I'm Gillespie, and this is Law&Crime Network. Today we're taking a closer look at the case of 29-year-old Yuliana Castillo Sanchez. She was an Instagram model with thousands of followers and created adult content for a site called Fansly, similar to OnlyFans. On top of that, Yuliana had two children, a son and a daughter, the latter of whom she was celebrating her birthday on Saturday, September 28th. Yuliana was in the San Jose province of Costa Rica on the way to her daughter's birthday party. As she was waiting for an Uber, Yuliana reportedly started arguing with some men outside. At some point during all this, gunshots rang out, at least one hitting Yuliana. Now, according to reports, the two men were on a motorcycle and after the shooting drove off. As of right now, they haven't been arrested, charged, or even publicly identified. Officials are now searching for these men as the investigation continues. Meanwhile, it's still unclear what exactly Yuliana's cause of death was or where she was shot. Officials say she was pronounced dead on the scene, but it's still unclear what led up to her shooting, including what this apparent argument was about or what any sort of motive could be. Some family members have wondered whether Yuliana was the victim of a mugging because some of her personal belongings were missing from the scene. There's also a possible theory that Yuliana's public persona could be a motive of sorts, that the suspect potentially found her online and may have even left a trail of evidence on social media. That's just a theory though, because right now there are a lot of facts about the case that are unknown. To try to make sense of what we do know, we've got to bring in retired Commander Will Svilar.
Immediately, it looks like it's a street robbery. It's a violent street robbery. And when you look at it at face value and basically everything that I've read, that's what it is. It's a two-man crew on a motorcycle. They're doing robberies on the street. I looked into other robberies, and there have been with motorcycle crews. There was one in September 1st, not far away, where they did a home invasion. Two guys on a motorcycle, bound, pistol whipped the residents, robbed them, took off on the motorcycle. So when I started doing the research on this, I was like, well, how common is this street robbery situation in Costa Rica? And it turns out in the last few years, they've been increasing, along with their homicide rate.
If you're out and about while you're listening to this video, pay attention here. I have something you're not going to want to miss. It's called Upside, the free app that gets you cash back on daily essentials. I now use it every time I pump gas because it's so easy and it's free. All you have to do is download the Upside app and then claim an offer for whatever you're buying. So you just pay as usual and then follow the steps on the app to get paid. To find out how much you could earn, click the link in the description to download Upside or scan the QR code on the screen and use our promo code LCNews to get an extra 25 cents back on every gallon on your first tank of gas. Do you think it's possible that these street robbing situations, as you're referring to them, are they crimes of opportunity?
Absolutely crimes of opportunity. They're tooling around. You look at it, a motorcycle is a perfect way to get around tight streets. Really easy to escape. They can go places cars can't go, and they can do it quickly. And all they do is just cruise around and look for the right victim.
I think what's interesting in this case, though, is that obviously being robbed or mugged is terrifying. The fact that you're dealing with that, you're losing your belongings, you're maybe being brutalized in some way. But that's a huge cry from murder, jumping from just stealing your purse to murder. So what would make that escalation?
Resistance by the victim, unfortunately. And it goes against our human nature to just allow people to do things to us, most of us anyway. And it looks like in this case, this poor girl fought back and she was killed for it. We see it all the time. I mean, we talk to victims all the time in robberies, and the offender will say, don't make this a murder. So basically, they know if it escalates, they're going to react with increased violence. And unfortunately, I think that's what happened in this case. It's resistance by the victim.
But still, there are a lot of questions in Yuliana's murder, including her cause of death. So why is it that this info has yet to be released?
I don't know how they do it down there in Costa Rica. I know that some of the news reports I read said it was a gunshot wound to the head. I don't know if they have to go through whatever channels they do. But, in this country, it's right after the postmortem, they give you a cause, at least. Maybe not the manner, but at least the cause of death. I don't know why they haven't released that information.
Looking for the suspects in this case, obviously, we have a couple of witnesses who said there was some sort of argument, there were people on a motorcycle, but how are they working to track these people down? If there was any surveillance video or ring camera, things like that?
Absolutely. I mean, that's the first thing you got to do is to see, is there video surveillance? And then you have to get out there and you got to canvass. You got to pound the pavement. You got to talk to people. You got to knock on doors. It's the middle of the day. Again, like we say so many times when we speak, somebody saw something, and you have to get out there and try to find it. Be it, I mean, you don't necessarily just have to canvass people either. You can canvass properties. What I mean by that is, we always take a look up at the corner of the building for video surveillance. And I don't know how advanced they are in technology down there, but this is a pretty good sized country. I think there's like 5 million people in this country. And they should be technically advanced enough to at least some of the business have some kind of video surveillance. But video surveillance, and you have to pound the pavement and talk to people.
You mentioned there's kind of been a wave of these type of crimes recently, at least. You mentioned one in September, and this one again was late September. Do you think it's possible that Costa Rican authorities are going to reach out to the people who were involved in that to maybe compare notes, see if it's potentially the same suspects?
They absolutely should do that. They should absolutely talk to each other. We used to do it all the time between districts and areas where if we see something that maybe looks a little bit like something that we had in our area, we'll talk to another area to see what they had on it. They may have some more information. They may have caught the people that were home invaded, may have some video surveillance, and you can match things up, motorcycle type. And I guess they kept their helmets on, but how many times do people change their helmets? So at least you can have a general idea if you're dealing with the same crew. But, like everywhere else, there are multiple crews working doing these robberies.
Something we talk about a lot in not just this story, but all of the other cases that we cover is digital evidence. Because again, we already mentioned the security camera video, things like that, but also everyone has their phone with them all the time. I mean, they are taking pictures or texting, it's showing their location. Is that something that investigators are then going to take a look at, actually her cell phone?
Absolutely. You absolutely would do that. And they should have done that immediately. If you know that she got a cell phone, it's missing, you start to ping it, as we call it. Again, I don't know what their technology is like down there, what kind of cooperation they're going to get from a cell phone company or provider. But that's immediately what we do. If we want to try to find her property. And again, if the phone pops up in a pawn shop, now you got another avenue. If it pops up, somebody gets arrested, they have the phone. You have that other avenue, and you have to start. You have to start there because, like you said, people are attached to their phone. Nobody goes anywhere without their phone. Matter of fact, she summoned the Uber on her phone, we would assume. So there's a record there. So that phone's active up to the point where she gets killed, where the robbery, and I say robbery happens and the murder eventually takes place. She's active on her phone. So the phone's huge. That's a really good point.
We're also talking about this case today because she was a public figure in Costa Rica. Like I mentioned, she had thousands of Instagram followers and she created content for, again, a site similar to OnlyFans. So do you think that's possible to be involved in any way? The fact that she had a lot of eyes on her, people maybe could have tracked where she was going?
I think that's possible. But in this case, if you're tracking where someone's going, you really want to hit them in the middle of the day, broad daylight, people around. If you're going to be stalking someone and trying to commit a crime or a robbery against them, you're going to probably wait till they're not in the wide open like that. It's possible. I think it was a random street robbery, unfortunately.
That's what's interesting too. You keep bringing up the broad daylight because whenever we think about these crimes, oftentimes it's at night because obviously it's darker, it's harder to see and identify who these suspects are. But this, again, happened in broad daylight, which is pretty gutsy, I guess, that they were doing it. Why do you think that would have happened, that they would have not waited until nighttime and just done it right when the sun's up?
Crime of opportunity. She's standing on the corner. She's obviously waiting for something. And, like you said, she had some following. She had some fame. So she may have had outward displays of wealth, like jewelry or a fancy purse or something like that. And these predators, they look for stuff like that, and then they'll go right after that person, regardless of the time of day. Depending on what their motive is. Their motive is obviously, financial gain, but for what? For drugs or something like that, where you really have to score some money fast? could be any one of those things.
You talked about how this is something that happens somewhat frequently, which is tough to talk about, but it does. I mean, these robberies happen left and right. But is it important to note the way that they ended up killing her? I know that's kind of gruesome to talk about, but they shot her rather than stabbing or beating, anything like that. Does that matter at all in their MO, so to speak?
Sure, because you're going to have some ballistic evidence, either from a round taken from the victim or a shell casing. If they used an automatic weapon or semi-automatic weapon, there'll be a shell casing on the scene. These are things you can use to link the people with the crime, or at least the weapon with the crime. And if you have, like, say this home invasion we spoke of earlier, if they discharge the weapon, there'd be a casing there. So now you take that casing from that scene, compare it to the other scene, and maybe you make a connection. And the reason why they used the gun, because they had one.
Also, in cases, we talk a lot about DNA evidence. We know that these people had helmets on, but unclear whether they had gloves. Is it possible that investigators are taking a look for any leftover DNA or fingerprints, things like that, to run through a system?
Oh, I guarantee you, whatever assets they have or any resources they have to test for those kind of things. And here's an important one. There's a physical struggle between the victim and the offenders. Maybe she scratches one. Maybe there's an exchange of blood. She makes one of the offenders bleed in some way or another. You'll do. I guarantee you. I don't want to say that, but I'm pretty sure that on post-mortem they would have done a fingernail scrape to see if you can get DNA from under the fingernails, because that's really, really good evidence. So absolutely, they're going to use all the resources. Dust for prints. Try to do lifts. They're going to look for DNA. And again, in these cases, we find we have the best results because of the physical conflict between the two. Because usually in something like that, there is some kind of exchange, hairs, fibers, DNA between the victim and the offender. So there's a, you get a cross on that, and that's huge.
You talked about the scrapings from under the fingernails because there was some sort of altercation between them, at least according to reports, that there was shouting, she was arguing with them and seemingly fighting back. Do you think that was the right route to take? Not victim shaming in any way, but if somebody's watching this and find themselves in a similar situation, what should they do?
I hate to say this because I hate to let the criminals win, but you should absolutely give your stuff up. You should absolutely give your stuff. It's material, you can replace it. Now, I know we work hard for our things. We don't want to give it away, but we can always replace money. We can always replace materials, but those two children cannot replace their mom. So as much as I hate to say it, you have to give up your material things.
Meanwhile, Costa Rica itself has some startling crime statistics.
I can tell you this. In Costa Rica, between 2022 and 2023, there was a 38% rise in homicides. 38%. That's significant. That's not just a blip on the radar. You're also seeing increased street robberies with increased violence. Their police force is small, and they're not getting the resources that they need. The average salary for a policeman in Costa Rica is $600 a month. For a relatively rich tourist society, $600 a month. So again, we talked about these resources and the things they can use to track criminals. I don't know if they have it. I mean, they're down 200 patrol cars there. You also show a 31% youth unemployment rate. So these kids got to get money from somewhere. 21,000 dropped out of high school last year. So when you talk about the increase in robberies, you dig a little deeper and you start to see these root causes. And especially if you're dealing with young offenders. Young offenders really sometimes don't grasp what they're doing or the ramifications of what they do. And that's, unfortunately, Costa Rica is not the only place that's seeing that. It's everywhere, especially in this country.
But does that mean everyone who travels abroad should be on high alert?
Absolutely, they should be. You should obviously, you should use universal precautions wherever you are. You should, always be aware of your surroundings. But when you go to places like that, we spoke of it earlier, you don't try to flash wealth. Don't have a rollie hanging off your arm. Don't have a giant ring, things like that. I mean, these are things that anybody can see. And you don't know if these people are working with other people on the street either. Okay, I got a mark sitting outside wherever. They got this on. Zoom. Now here comes the motorcycle and here goes the robbery. So you have to be aware of your surroundings. You can't be flashy. And again, we work hard. We want to wear our nice things. We want to do but you got to think of the big picture, and that is violent crime is increasing, and not just here, everywhere.
Especially if you're traveling to another country, do you think it's important to reach out to the US Embassy or have some sort of contact there? I know recently I went to Europe and I set up some sort of form that showed, okay, I'm going to be in France these days, Italy these days. Do you think that's smart for travelers to do?
Yes, I think you should put a fingerprint out there or a footprint out there when you're traveling, especially abroad. And you go to the State Department website, and pretty much anywhere you want to go, it'll give you a threat assessment of that area. So the State Department website, and again, Costa Rica, I think, is a level 2 now, which just means increased awareness, increase your awareness. But that's all on the State Department's website. You can anywhere you want to go, the State Department will tell you what's going on there. And you can never have too much information. You can never be too well informed because it protects you. It gives your defenses a little bit more. I mean, you can maybe pay more attention, but absolutely, people need to know where you are, especially if you don't know where you are.
What about sharing your location? This is something a lot of people do now, especially on iPhones. You can share it with your family, your friends, whoever. Do you think that's an important thing to do?
I think it's a great idea, especially traveling abroad. It used to be back in the old days, you could get lost for a while. You can't get lost anymore. It started with the pagers, and then it went to the phones, and now it dropped your location. Is it an invasion of your privacy? You can always turn it off. But when you're traveling abroad and you're alone, it's a good idea that people can find you.
As of now, no arrests have been made in Yuliana's case, and her murder is still under investigation. For Law&Crime, I'm Gillespie.